Hi guys, it's Lakeisha from Henbang Chinese, and I'd like to say welcome back to Henbang Chinese's YouTube channel. Today is going to be a little bit different because I'm not actually going to be teaching you guys any Chinese. I'm going to be giving you some of my tips and tricks for how best to learn and study Chinese. So let's get into it. So this is a video that a lot of you guys have actually requested, and I'm more than happy to give you a little bit of information. So just as a reminder, or for those of you who haven't seen me before, my name is Lakeisha and I've been studying Chinese since I was 11 years old, and I did take it as a GCSE option. So that's basically where I have my knowledge from, because I had to revise a lot for mock exams, even though I didn't do my actual exams in the end because of certain circumstances around the year that I was taking them. But I did have to learn the vocabulary anyway, and I did go to China as well, which obviously I needed a certain level of Chinese ability to be able to go out there. And this is purely going to be based on my experience with learning Chinese, because everyone's different and different things are going to work for different people. I'm going to try and give you guys a range of different stuff that should work. Not everything will work, but something in here should be of some kind of use or some kind of benefit to you, hopefully. If not, that's fine. Maybe I can make a part 2 to this video. But for now, let's just get into the tips and tricks. A lot of people like to think of Chinese as being quite hard. And maybe they don't like to think about that, maybe that's pushing it a little bit, but it is quite generally considered a difficult language to learn by the student population, even though it really shouldn't be, because it's not that bad. Especially in terms of grammar, because some of the grammar is actually a lot simpler. So that's my first tip, is to kind of dispel any untrue kind of ideas that you have before you start trying to learn the language. Because if you go into it thinking, oh my god, this is going to be really, really difficult, I'm not going to be able to do this, then you're just going to put yourself down before you've even tried. And that's not okay, because if you're putting yourself down already, you haven't even started trying to learn the language, then you're never going to be able to do it to the best of your ability, because you don't believe it. You believe that it's going to be difficult and it's above your ability, and it's just simply not true. So to kind of dispel these ideas, I think it is important to know what kind of things might be barriers to you, what kind of things you're going to struggle with, because that helps you to plan how you're going to study and how you're going to learn around your struggles and your abilities. But don't think that just because something's going to be difficult, it's impossible, because nothing's impossible if you put your mind to it, and it can actually be quite enjoyable when you get into it. Tip number 2 is to find your motivation. This could be why you want to study the language, if you're doing it to get a set job, or you're doing it to communicate with family members or friends, if you're doing it to travel. Whatever it is, find your motivation. And if that motivation maybe isn't something quite as set in stone as that, think about why you got the idea to learn Chinese in the first place. Why did you think, out of all of the languages that you could have chose, why did you choose Chinese? And even why did you choose to learn a second language at all? Because a lot of people don't. So it's really important to know why you want to do something if you're going to be able to do it well. Because finding that motivation, finding out why you want to do something and what you want to get out of it, is going to be the driving point when you feel unmotivated, when you feel like you're struggling and you don't want to do it anymore, when you feel like giving up. That motivation is going to be the thing that gets you through it. So it's very, very important that you kind of reflect inwards and see, right, what did I think when I decided I wanted to learn a second language? Why did I choose Chinese? What do I want to get out of it? And how can I use this to help motivate myself? Tip number 3 is to not just rely on books. Now, I know that might be different to what some of your teachers have told you, but books are not the only thing that you can learn from. Yes, sometimes it's cool to have textbooks, sometimes they can be quite helpful, and I do have textbooks for Chinese and they are quite helpful, but they're not the only source that I use, because when you're learning a language, it's much more about just a list of words on paper that you need to memorize. It's about finding out how to see them in context. It's working out how to identify what a word means. It's figuring out how to identify what a word means, even if you don't necessarily know the word itself, but you might be able to work it out from context or kind of other words that you already know. It's just about being able to look at things as wider than just a list of facts and a list of definitions, because language can be used in a million different ways by a million different people, and it kind of changes depending on who's using it and what they're using it for. So I'd recommend watching movies, documentaries, reading books, watching YouTube videos, anything that you can think of, listening to music, anything that kind of gives you more of a Chinese experience. Anything that throws you into Chinese without just sitting down and answering questions out of a textbook, because not only is that just boring and kind of dry, and you don't really want to do it a lot of the time because you have to do it for so many other lessons, I think it's important that you embrace the wider context of China and its culture and its history to be able to understand its language fully. So I definitely explore movies, I definitely explore music, I definitely explore some kind of like fiction books, I definitely explore maybe podcasts or radio, anything that you can really access. And you can get this a lot for free, you can get it online a lot of the time. So don't ever just think, oh, I have this textbook to help me learn Chinese, it's the only thing that I can ever use, because that's just not true. And not only is it just not true, it's probably not going to be the most beneficial way for you to learn. Tip number 4 is to have a routine, and I cannot stress enough how important it is to have a routine when it comes to learning a language. I started off learning Chinese, I didn't have a routine. I did start off doing it in school, so I did have some kind of a routine around when my lessons were going to be, but outside of that, I did not have any routine at all. And my lessons were once a week, maybe twice a week, I can't really remember, but it wasn't very often, and our lessons were quite short. And ideally, you kind of want to be exposing yourself to a different language as often as possible. So maybe like 5 minutes at the start of every day, or maybe not even at the start, just 5 minutes at some point during the day. You can maybe look at a new word, or maybe listen to a song, just to expose yourself to that language. Because if you're just doing it maybe once a week, and you're sitting there and you're doing a little bit, or maybe you're not even doing it once a week, maybe you're doing it as and when you feel like it, that's not going to be an effective way to study for you. And it's not going to be the most beneficial. You have to expose yourself to language consistently over quite a long amount of time, really. And it's going to make it so much easier when you start to put a routine into place. When I started to put a routine into place, I started by just having about 10 minutes every day, normally at the end of the day, and I would focus on one word, one character that I wanted to drill for 10 minutes, and just make sure I knew what that character meant, the correct stroke order, how to write it, to make sure I'll be able to recognize it if it ever comes up. But once I'd spent 10 minutes just working on that one character, I'd stop. Because just doing a short amount but consistently is a lot better than sitting down for maybe 2 hours trying to cram in a bunch of stuff from a textbook. You have to kind of pick what you want to do and how you can make it into a smaller amount of time and do it over a period. The same thing goes with kind of grammar and sentence structure. If you kind of try and think of multiple different grammar rules in one go, you're just going to get confused and it's just not going to be okay. Like, it's going to be a lot more difficult to understand. So I'd focus on one thing at a time, maybe even divide it into different topics. So find out a bunch of words that are about hobbies and get the Chinese words for them and focus on hobbies for a while. And then once you've kind of nailed hobbies, then move on to maybe sports or food. I don't know. But try and make a routine with it and try and stick to it as much as possible, because I know there are going to be days when life gets busy and you might forget to do it. But the more consistently you can study, the better, because it makes things a lot easier in the long run. So, tip number 5 is going to be my final tip. And it's going to be to make sure you know what your goals are going to be. Because you have to kind of identify what areas you want to work on most, what areas you want to prioritize, and set goals around that. If you're going to be going away, for example, you're going to be going to China for just, I don't know, maybe you're going to China for a few days. Maybe you're going for a sporting event. So if you're going for a sporting event, then you're probably going to need to know words around sport, and you're probably going to need to know some basic stuff like how to introduce yourself, please, thank you, that kind of thing. So you would set your goals before you go to that event. You would set goals which are going to help you to learn the words that you're going to need for that one thing. In the same way, if you're doing this in school, then you're going to look at and you have an exam. Let's say you have an exam, you're doing it at school, you have an exam next week on food words. You're going to set goals around the food words and focus on food words for a while so that you can get the best grade possible on that test. Then you get the test and you can see, right, this is how well I know my food words. And if you got it nailed, then great, you can move on to something else. If you don't, then just remember, because you might have to move on to something else for another test or a new topic. But it's important to identify that you didn't do too great on the food work, so that's something that you're going to have to come back to at some point. And being able to set those goals mindfully so that you know what you need to achieve, what you're struggling with, and being able to place that in a timeline and think about which goals are going to be most important when, then it's going to be really beneficial for you, because not only does it mean you're going to get better grades and you're going to be able to work on things that are going to be useful at the time, it's also going to lift up your motivation and your confidence, because if you're working on a food test and you don't really do much food words because you thought that you were, I don't know, going to study hobbies or maybe film words or something like that, and you thought, oh, I'm really struggling with these, I'm going to do these even though I've got a food exam next week, and then you do really bad on the food exam because you've been so worried about this other topic, then it's really going to bring your confidence down. You're going to feel like you don't really know it, even though you probably do. You just need to put in a little bit more time, a little bit more work. But if you go in there, you do a little bit of work over a week on food words, and then you know in the back of your mind, yeah, I need to do film, I need to do whatever when I get a chance, when I have some space in my time. And then you go in and you've done your food works for a week, you get really good grade. That's going to bring up your confidence. So that's all of my tips and tricks for today. If you would like to see a part 2, then don't be shy, just let me know in the comments down below. In the meantime, make sure you check out our YouTube channel and see what kind of wider resources that we have. A lot of stuff on the actual vocabulary itself. Make sure, if you haven't already, you check out our blog, www.henbangchinese.com. And maybe, if you're feeling kind of generous, then follow us at Henbang Chinese on Instagram. It's been lovely speaking to you. I hope this video was somewhat useful, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye guys.